So I won't recap what I've just said, if that's okay, Tim.
No, all good. Yeah.
Is that enough context for everyone? Basically, the initial priority that we're looking at is trying to get back to a state where we've got more blocks in an epoch than missing, because the priority is to get to a state where we're relatively healthy, if not finalizing, because to get to that state, then we can. Um, so I'd like a missed slot rate of more like 25% or less. Um,
Yeah, I was just
so
curious where we're at right now.
we're a few epochs ago when I wrote a message in Interrupt, we were looking at um over the course of 4 epochs, the worst was 4 in an epoch and the best was 8 in an epoch. So we're at about 25% best case coverage at the moment. And we would like that to be more like 75% before we start issuing a lot of slashings. And the reason for that is because slashings are going to cause a little bit of chaos around the place. And they're inevitable, yes, but we need to get to a healthy state before we start destabilizing things. Hopefully that's enough context for anyone, but I'm happy to answer more questions about why liveness is more important than finalization, if that's helpful.
Maybe one question is what's the trade-off between them? You would explain that for non-CL devs, like why can't we just do both?
Yeah, sure. Both's a good idea. Finalization is going to be a long road. Liveness is a short road. So liveness is the primary concern, but also to get back to finalization, what we need to have is 2/3 of our effective balance voting on the right chain. And to get to that point, it'd be nice to first understand how many validators are on the canonical chain and proposing blocks, because that will give us a better idea of how many need to be slashed. And so while we could all issue mass slashings, we could also potentially be able to distribute the slashings and have less per team. And therefore, everyone hopefully has some validators left at the end of this event.
Got it.
So, Gwilio, the whole point is we can't stop all the slashings, but we can stop some slashings. So, basically, if we get back to a point where 2/3 are voting, then whoever's still in that surround vote situation can avoid voting and we still finalize, if that makes sense. We haven't lost liveness. We jeopardize liveness. If no nodes can synchronize to the chain, then eventually we do lose liveness. But liveness can be maintained as long as we've got enough nodes following along. In what way do you think we lost liveness, Likeline?
We weren't making any blocks. The honest validators could not find the honest chain. That's kind of the definition, right?
Well, that's why we were shutting nodes down, yeah. So this is the problem, right? If we've got so many nodes that are on the wrong chain and it's hard to get to the right chain, then we do lose liveness. And that's what we've been trying to avoid and why we've been trying to get more blocks, because the more weight we add to that chain, the less likely we are to actually completely destroy this thing.
Right, but we should be robust in those types of scenarios. Like we're not talking about 5% or less of validators that were on an
Yeah,
honest chain. It should have been 20, 25%. And that's an amount that
100% agree.
they should have found each other and they should have continued building a chain, albeit like, very sparse.
So there's sync issues, but the core issue and the start of this whole problem was that a supermajority of nodes were choosing to verify that an invalid block was okay on the chain, right? And then things started building. That's where this problem started. Now, how we avoid that in the future, there's going to be opinions that we can look into later. Probably not the forum to dig into.
Yeah, I think we'll have time to do like a deeper retrospective on this, but I
Yeah.
agree that like at least like on the sync side, like yeah, there's probably some stuff that should be improved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Roman, Julio, do you have your hand up to comment on that?
Yes. So
Yep.
one of the goals that all post here is improving the miss slot rate. And while we were pretty clear in the Holesky stake right now is a roughly 50-50 split between core devs and the community. And while core devs are more or less knowledgeable on what to do right now, even though we should formalize the instructions, we still should give clear instructions to the community, because we'll never get to our target of 25% miss slots.
Yes, and I know yesterday on the Interop channel, people were saying they'd want to make sure they can reliably sync their client teams can reliably sync nodes and add them to the network and whatnot before we sort of instruct the community to do this. But do we feel like we're in a spot where now putting the message out in a clearer way to everyone would be helpful?
We're close to that, but we've only really constructed 2 nodes, I think, successfully. So to be able to give it to people to replicate, I'd want to be able to do it on more than a couple of our nodes, because otherwise it's just going to be in support nightmare.
Okay.
I know that a couple of people in the community who have decent amount of validators already have their nodes synced, but they're not enabling the validators. Should we tell them to do that?
So my message remains exactly the same as on the interop channel. Please leave your slashing database, your slashing protection database in place, but please enable your validators. That's where we need to be. We need to have the validators active, and the slashing protection will stop you from attesting, which is fine. If you're in a position where you can attest with your slashing protection, that's great. That's actually even better. And there are a percentage that won't have upgraded, so they're going to be in that position.
Okay, so run your validator. If you're synced, keep slashing protection on.
Yes. And then the next step after this will be a controlled rate of slashing. We don't want to go crazy excessive, because in the past we have seen slashing events that are larger start taking nodes down. So we want to kind of dip our toe in the water and get a rate slashed, but we don't want to do crazy amounts.
Got it. And if people do not have, if their node is out of sync, should they try to get it synced up the head?
Yeah, so for any clients that have put out releases already, I think there's EL clients, some CLs have, and we probably will tomorrow. These give you a good chance of getting back into sync. Some people have got databases floating around. I won't speak to each client's position, but we may end up having a database floating around as well, because it seems to be a lot easier at this point with the forks.
Okay.
Quick question: if this was like a real scenario, at this point we would I don't know, someone we have I don't know, 30% of the network is going to get slashed, and they know that they're going to get slashed either now or at some point. Wouldn't it make sense for them to exit to get slashed as quickly as possible, so that they can get their money and move it? And if that is the rational choice for a validator that is going to get slashed anyway, this would massively increase the problem for us, because if we cannot deal with these slashing events and the rational choice for a validator is to get slashed as quickly as possible, then that's kind of bad, right?
Yeah, the way
Yeah,
slashings
so
are handled. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say you are right in that the first people that get slashed, that get their slashings into a block, are less affected, but everyone's going to be affected in this event. So you're going to be active but slashed on the chain for a period of time before you get to exit, and the rate of exit is gated, so we can only exit 8 validators per epoch. This is going to mean that of the order of, we're probably talking a couple of 100,000, several 100,000 validators. It's going to take a couple of weeks to exit them all. And for that reason, it's going to take a couple of weeks before we get back to finalization. So finalization as a target is a good goal, but it's going to take a couple of weeks. I think Mikhail's rough numbers were around 18 days, but it depends on how many validators exactly we need slashed.
Okay, I want to keep us on track to fixing Holesky. We only have 45 minutes left.
Yep.
There'll be a lot of like long-term things we need to figure out coming out of this.
Yep.
So to recap, like we have, part of the chain live. We want to grow that. We want people to bring up nodes online, ideally minimize the number of slashings. Then what do we expect the next steps to be? Do we just gradually keep iterating on this, or yeah?
I think we want to do a small number of slashings at a time initially, and the reason for that is just to make sure that clients stay up. We only have a rate of.
Sorry, just to, yeah.
How do
For
you
example,
control that?
well, it's pretty easy. You just remove slashing protection database
Yeah, but how do
from
you
a
do it?
set number of keys.
Yeah, but how do you do it slowly? It's
Well,
Holesky is kind of
I
a
have.
massive chain, right?
Okay, no. For example, we can only exit 20. We can only exit 8 keys per epoch. If we were to, in one epoch, enable remove the slashing protection for say 1,000 keys, then they're going to take a number of epochs to exit. We're not actually in a hurry to get these slashings to happen. We just want to make sure that the nodes stay up as much as possible, because the more nodes that can help maintain liveness, the
Yeah,
more likely we are to get back to finalization.
I was just thinking about the logistic of the 1,000 keys at a time. I don't know how the coordination looks on Holesky, honestly. So that was just my concern.
So my initial hope is that we get enough validators online so that we know the depth of our problem. If we're talking about needing to get 35% of the validators on the network slashed, then there's enough people in this room to do that. And we can divvy up that amongst the teams and say 10,000 here, 10,000 there. And we can say, you go first, you go second, and coordinate this somewhat. If it was on mainnet and the large slashing happened, they're all on the network and it would be interesting.
Okay, and what about the timings? Because right now, most of the validators are currently live, all of the operators at least are all getting slashed. And since Nethermind already lost 10% of their validator to slashings, so
So if you've removed your slashing database, which is not ideal, then you could be getting slashed right now. Yes.
Yeah, but it seems the majority. I mean, it seems a Testant, Nethermind, and some others are getting. Oh, and also Light is getting slashed. So yeah, the thing is
if they've chosen to remove their slashing protection, they will get slashed. They have performed a slashable action.
Yeah, okay. What I'm saying is that right now most of the blocks are produced by these people, and if if we don't act in a timely manner, the chain won't progress anymore because they're already at 10%.
No. This is why we need liveness, right? This is why we're pushing for liveness. The more validators that are online that haven't removed their slashing protection, the more blocks we can produce.
I'm just asking about the timings. That's why I'm just asking about the timings here.
We need to get some information before we go too gung-ho on timings. So we want to get as many blocks produced as possible and then get a small number slashed and see if we have problems across the network. And if we don't, we can increase the rate.
Okay, and we've seen slashing being produced, some slashings being produced already, I think. And do you know what the rough number has been or rate has been?
I haven't looked, to be honest. I've
Okay.
been concentrating on getting nodes up.
Most
fair.
lost 10%. You can check it on Dora.
Okay. And so, okay, so we want to get blocks coming reliably. Then we want to
Yeah.
slowly scale how many slashings we see. What's the mechanism to coordinate that?
Think we would start with the Holesky Genesis validator set and the Cordevs. And number of Cordev teams have like 100,000 validators, so it's pretty easiest for us to coordinate between those groups. Unless
Okay.
anyone has a better idea.
I think
Okay,
that's the way
let's
to
go
do
with-
it. Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
So once we know a reasonable number, we can determine how many each team's pretty much going to have to lose, and we can probably absorb most of it within the Cordev group. We may have to get some entities to get slashed a bit as well.
Okay. So once we do have, or in parallel to this, Merrick has a message saying we should have a list of the Holesky entities and their statuses. I think, was it Roman who put together a chart yesterday with like the attestation rate? Oh, do you want to maybe give context on the message you just posted?
Oh yeah, these are all of the organizations which are not core devs who have a decent amount of validators, and they're a part of a Holesky Genesis pool.
Okay, and we don't have statuses for most of them.
Okay, so I copied this message from the one I sent early in the morning, and some of them were able to provide the status back in the Telegram chat, but I don't have this compiled.
Okay.
I just sent the list.
Got it. And so my sense is there's like 1.7 million validators on Holesky. We have like 12 client teams, and there's like ballpark 300, 400K validators there. So like, it seems like we're in touch, or like, the vast majority of the stake is like aware of this and in touch. Is that a correct assumption? Yeah, Terrence?
I just want to mention that, like, by definition, not all the validators will get slashed, right? You're only in danger of getting slashed if you voted on the invalid justified checkpoint. But it's not clear to me who did that, who didn't do that. So when we plan this, we should look at who are the validators that voted for the invalid justified checkpoint. And then based on that number, we account for how do we slash them.
Is anyone looking into this? Yeah.
I think it's of the order of about 40%, maybe 30%, but I'm not 100% sure.
Bearing in mind, we'll also get this information on chain, because when a validator comes back online, if it didn't attest to the incorrect chain, then it's going to be able to attest normally on this chain. The slashing protection won't stop it from doing so. So we'll start to be able to get numbers from chain as the validators come back online. So pretty much it's self-selecting, right? Everyone who managed to bring their validator back online will see those numbers flow through the chain.
Okay, so and just to make sure, sorry, I understand as an EL person, if you bring your validator back online with the new release and you don't mess with your anti-slashing database and you attest, this means you didn't attest to the wrong finalized chain, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay, so I guess then, like, yeah, the instruction of telling people to come back online is still probably the main path forward. And then of these validators that come back online who are not attesting, we assume those are the slashable ones, or at least highly correlated with the slashable ones. And then with those, we can coordinate a response. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so at that point, we know the gap. And at that point, we can say, we've got a deficit of this many to make 66% happen.
Okay.
The other thing worth mentioning briefly is obviously any validator that's not online, and in fact every validator, because they're not attesting, will be going through inactivity leak as well. So they'll eventually get kicked out. But that's a slightly different system, and the balance isn't zeroed straight away, and a whole bunch of other things. But again, if people don't come back online, we're not kind of stuck in limbo. If the chain doesn't finalize because enough people are either slashed or not online, then eventually they'll get kicked out anyway by the system. But again, it's a relatively slow process because of the exit queue.
Got it.
And the
Okay.
other active
Yeah, go
question
ahead.
that I have for core devs for consensus layer is what happens if we have an active validator that reaches zero balance on chain? Because I don't know what happens to that validator in that instance, and I don't think we have any tests for that. But that's just an active question to think about, unless
get
someone knows the answer off the top of their head.
Zero. Once they get a 16 effective balance, they're exited, right?
No, they're put in the exit queue. So if we have 400,000 validators in the exit queue, then a lot of those are going to reach zero.
Okay. So it's just kind of a spec question.
this-
If you've got an exiting validator that's at zero.
If I've got an active validator that's in any state that reaches zero balance, does it just become exited, or does it cause some sort of gap in our spec? Because that's going to happen, I think, through this, because at the rate we're exiting, a lot are going to reach zero. So it'll be an interesting experience.
And there's no tests. Yeah, there's no tests for like zero balances.
Well, it's a weird case because you should get exited at 16, but because of the situation we're in, it's really into, and I put a call out onto it in a couple of channels, Daplian's DevCon talk, which goes into craziness that happens once we get a mass slushing event.
Got it. Okay. Jim, you also had some points around mitigating mitigations we can apply given this issue. I think I would pause any long-term conversations for now and focus on how do we actually get the chain back online. It does seem like we have a rough plan. Does anyone feel like, there is something broken or wrong here, or is everyone on board with this approach of, okay, let's get those back online, get the ones that are upgraded and haven't attested to attest to the right minority chain, get a tally of the one of the ones that have attested to the majority chain, and then coordinate slashings. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah, Roman?
Oh, one question to make it explicit. We will consider the chain quote unquote live or lively, and we'll start considering the slashing when we have 25% missing slot rate. Is that the number?
I'd like to be in that area. The less missed slots, the better, because once we start injecting a lot of slashings, we'll see pretty easily that clients are having problems if that rate increases a lot.
Okay, so yeah, to summarize that, get nodes back online. The ones that didn't attest get to attest to the correct chains. The one that did attest, we just keep on hold for now. Ideally, bring the number of missed slots back to 25% or less, then start coordinating the slashings. I guess one question there is if we quickly learn that, I guess we're gonna have to leak or slash a bunch of validators before we get this missed slot down to 25%. So is that like a correct assumption? Like we're gonna be probably waiting like several days, if not weeks.
We can produce blocks straight away with those validators. So there's two separate concerns. There's attestations, which are the votes that we're talking about, that we need to get 2/3 of, and there's block production. So we can produce a block safely without getting slashed if in this scenario where we're in now.
Wait, so what I meant is a validator who's previously attested to the finalized majority chain, they can no longer produce a block on the valid.
Yeah, they can. Yep.
Wow, without getting, okay, wow. So that means we should, okay.
Yeah, block slashing, you're only pretty much if you're signing two different blocks on the same slot. So as long as you're going ahead and you're not going back with your block production, you're fine to produce the next block.
Okay. And this means that if I'm running a validator with like the updated release that had previously attested on the wrong chain, then it's still valuable for me to get back online and try to produce as many blocks as possible.
Absolutely, yep. So the 20,000 keys that we've got on our Teku node are producing blocks now, but they're all slashable for attestation once we change the database over.
Okay. Oh, that's wild. I didn't know that. And then these validators don't need any like special setup. Basically, like as long as they have their slashing protection on, they're not gonna attest, and so they probably won't get slashed, but they'll be able to produce blocks.
100%.
Great, awesome. Okay, so this means that like within hours to days, we should be able to get that mid slot rate back to less than 25%. It like the blocker there is getting all of these operators to actually upgrade their software and start their nodes again and get up to head when they sync.
Yeah.
On the syncing side, so I know this was pretty problematic over the past day or so. Have things like improved? Is the I know people were using like the Panda Ops snapshots. Yeah,
it's improved a lot.
Yeah.
Even since this morning, like I've been syncing another node this evening, and it's going a lot better than the one that I was trying this morning is. So as more and more good nodes come online, it should be less and less of a problem to sync.
Yeah. So should people just like try vanilla syncing now, or is there any special configurations they should be running, or like should they download the EL snapshot from Panda Ops?
I think the snapshots aren't a bad idea if you have a snapshot that you can use with your clients. Definitely use the updated clients. There's some cases where we've had to like just service restart the CL because it gets marked as a bad peer, so it doesn't sync very well. So there's little nuances, but I think people can try it out as long as they're on the right client versions.
And just to make sure, so like the people have the right snapshots, like what is how can people verify that their snapshot is actually correct for the chain we want them to attest to or to sync to?
The database. I think the only Doro that's working really well, particularly at the moment, is PKs. It's hard without a node, so that's why I've been trying to keep up with Interop as well, the channel, because it's a lot easier to ask someone that's got a working node if you're running okay. And luckily, I've got a bunch of nodes to look at, but not all people are going to be in that position.
Okay. Okay, so
I'm not sure what the answer is there in a nice way, honestly.
Yeah, fair enough. So if you're like plugging in snapshots into your node, then maybe check out Interop and make sure you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, there's we could say a specific slot that you need to be on, which is after the bad block. And if that slot, if you go the wrong direction at a specific point, we know you're going to end up in the wrong place. And that's actually fairly early in the sync. So we should probably define that really well and make sure people understand that. Oh,
actually, like, yeah, Sam from Panda Ops has a script that was shared in the chat that seems to do just this, which is great. Oh, amazing. Okay. So, yeah, this seems like a rough path forward. Yeah, Raphael?
I just had an idea, maybe trying to improve this the syncing. So we do have like 2 out of 4 nodes on our side are like synced. I was considering just taking, a data snapshot from the EL and CL there and just spin up another, I don't know, 50, 100 nodes with that. Just in hope that we could help like on the syncing. What do you guys think?
Is there a reason
The
not
more
to do
good
it?
nodes, the better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah, then we'll
Won't
try
it
to use it.
not? Won't it not onboard new stake until the chain's finalized?
yeah, so but we can have non-validating nodes that still help the health of the network.
Yeah.
And the main purpose is they'll just help everyone else sync better, basically.
Yep, that's their only purpose. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will try to bring up more nodes.
Yeah, even if it's a handful, it would be still helpful.
Yeah, and I guess if anyone else on this call is listening and has the ability to rapidly do this, then that would help the network stabilize. So yeah, peer-to-peer is offering to spin up another 20. Do we need a fallback in case the recovery fails? What do you mean by recovery fails, Ethan?
Like if we cannot, like if this plan that we have doesn't work out, what do we do?
I mean,
Doesn't work
sorry.
out how.
Like if not enough peers or validators started testing to the correct chain.
We don't really need the testing. We need block production, but basically it's probably not the right forum to go into doomsday scenarios. Maybe the chain crashes, but it is a test chain and we could spin another one up, worst case, I guess. I don't want to go too far into that because I think it might railroad the meeting.
Yeah, I mean,
the other thing I would say is that this specific scenario is something we have fixes for Polia, so we really want to make sure that the Polia ELs are up to date so that we don't cause a problem there. But I don't think it's a reason to slow Polia's fork down. But that's just my opinion. We can go into that tomorrow on EL if you want, on ACD.
Matthew?
So the one thing that's unclear to me is that I understand that we're going to have to start attesting and thus slashings, but is the goal in order to reach quorum in order to finalize, or are we slashing in order to reduce the amount of effective balance in order to lower the amount necessary for finalization in subsequent epochs? And there are a couple of second order effects that I think we should discuss. I don't know if this meeting is the right one. But once you exit a certain number of validators, now how do you attest for the second epoch when you're going to have a very long queue for exits? And I think like, just discussing that process more than like just get state chain stabilized and just get to the point where we're getting to slashings. I think we need to really think about what are steps 2 and 3, because it will inform the process that we go through in order to schedule and stage those slashings such that the end goal of finalization is actually achievable.
I mean, the end goal is hopefully to keep the chain alive and finalizing. The reality of the matter is if we get of the order of 400,000 slashings, that a lot of things are going to go to zero, and it's going to take probably a couple of weeks to get to a point of finalization. We need to get to a point where we're stable enough to start that process, and we need to keep the exits going at about a rate of 8 per epoch. Otherwise, it's going to take longer and longer. So that's why I guess everyone's so determined for stability first, then let's start the slashing going. But in reality, it's going to take several weeks.
Saulius?
Yeah, so one thing we didn't discuss so far is that we didn't test Spectra successfully on a large network, and it was and we only had Holesky for that, and Holesky is not in this shape right now, and it will not be in the shape for quite a long time. I mean, like mainnet size network with a healthy million of validators. So I think it's very important to discuss how we're going to solve that, because we don't want to delay the Pectra release on the mainnet for very long. So one of the ways to do that, I think we could try to shadow fork the Holesky, and in some sense it could be another disaster recovery for let's say for even bigger disaster than we had right now. So for example, if just imagine the situation where we kind of come to conclusion where we see that it's not possible to survive the some fatality in at the consensus layer, and then we need to somehow save the EL state in some way, for example, shadow forking or essentially forking the CL state that was before the failure. So I think we could try to focus on making some kind of shadow fork on Holesky, which would be based on the validator set that was before the crash.
Right. So I guess, yeah, I want to make sure we fix Holesky first, but I agree that, having a proper Pectra testing on a large validator set would be valuable. So is the thing that's required to do the shadow fork basically just a snapshot of Holesky's EL and CL state pre-fork, and then we would shadow fork from there?
So I don't understand this suggestion, because for that you would need every Genesis validator and every Holesky validator to basically spin up a duplicate setup to participate in this
Correct.
test.
And then to the extent that we have a supermajority from core devs, like maybe that's possible.
But we don't have a super majority from core devs because it's a 50-50 stake split.
And yeah, we have done shadow forks before without that, but usually the shadow forks just test the transition and they kind of degrade pretty quickly afterwards. So the other option is, yeah, assuming we have like 50% of the stake, like, yeah, if we don't have enough to finalize, is there a valuable test that we get out of this? Yeah.
But we can bring maybe part of the community to make a bit more than 2/3 of the stake.
Yeah. Yeah.
I personally think like we're stretching the community enough, involving them so closely in Holesky recovery efforts, and we cannot expect them to participate in this experiment as well.
Yeah, but
from what I remember, the Holesky Genesis keys, a lot of them were given out by ETH Panda Ops. So they may well have the private keys for most of the Genesis validators already. So they can just pick up and run those validators themselves. We don't actually need the community to step in and run them.
Oh, we don't have the keys for Holesky validators. It was another process when we set them up. Every team basically sent us a list of pub keys instead of handing with mnemonics.
Bango's that idea.
Yeah. Okay, Alex, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I had two things. The first one, well, I guess I wanted to confirm. So we wanted to wait for a particular number of filled slots on the chain. And I guess we said 75%. Do we want a time cutoff? Like, let's say, we get to like 40 or 50 in like the next 6 hours. What if it takes more than a day to get to 75. Do we want to wait for 75 or have a cutoff?
I think your potential for things to go spectacularly interesting directions is very high if your block production is quite low. So sure, we can try it, but we have to accept that this testnet may completely fail if we do enough bad things to this network.
Right, but what's the concern? Just that there aren't enough blocks, and then we spam it with slashings, and then everything falls over.
We spam it with slashings, enough clients have enough issues that we don't have liveness anymore, and we get to the point where we can no longer sync. That's how Gorley kind of went. We didn't spam it with slashings, but we ended up with not enough validators that could maintain the state of the network, and we lost liveness before we wanted to shut it down. Honestly, if we just want to shut this down anyway, then we just pull the pin on, move on with our lives. That's an option, and it probably saves us a lot of hours. But I think we should try to recover it so that we know how to cope with these things properly.
Yeah, I think it's worth trying to recover because we're heading in the right direction. So then do we just want to see how it goes over the next, say, 24 hours? And I guess we can make a judgment call if it doesn't look great.
That would be my suggestion. Try and get back to as many get documentation out to tell people how to sync their nodes and try to get as many validator keys back up producing blocks. And if we can't do that, then sure, we just start seeing what happens when we slash things. But
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we can make a call.
I had a second thing as well.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, Tim, go ahead if you're just going to make a comment about ACD.
I was just gonna say, like, yeah, let's make a call about this on our core devs tomorrow. Like, we'll see and if things are going well even before that, then great. But if we see that we're like at 55% on our core devs tomorrow and out of ideas about how to get that number higher, then yeah, we can decide if we want to start triggering slashings.
Yeah. Okay. And the second thing was Mario had a nice question here. So I believe if people have slashing protection set up correctly, they could just exit on the good chain. And we don't need to like have a mass slashing. I don't know if people feel like one route is favorable over another.
yes, but also you can't exit while we're in long inactivity, so long non-finalization. So something has to happen to get back to the balance. We can't just exit validators while we're not finalizing. I could be wrong if someone wants to correct me, but I believe that validators can't exit until we're finalizing.
I'll go double check. But if so, then yeah, the slashing is the only route then.
To reduce the balance.
Jim?
Yeah, just wanted to say, I know this we're focused on Holesky here. We probably do want to talk about mitigations for this event before Sepolia, and also if we're going with Sepolia now. If the time for that's tomorrow, that's fine. But obviously that's only the execution layer guys are on there theoretically tomorrow. And the conversation is probably a little bit wider in that you probably want buy-in from consensus layer as well, if we, for what happens with Sepolia.
Yeah, I guess maybe to address the EL point, like every CL team, please send someone tomorrow. It's important. I understand some of you are in Australia, so if not everyone on your team can make it, that's fine. But like, yes, if there is not a rep from every CL team tomorrow, that will be bad. So please have someone there. I think, yeah, so for Sepolia, the main concern is, do we want to put out a release that delays the fork or removes the fork and get everybody to update ASAP? On the EL side, people have already put out releases that fix the issue. So, and I've been waiting until tomorrow to update kind of the announcement and potentially make another announcement because of what we may decide. But the risk delaying Sepolia is we now need to get all the validators to upgrade to yet another release, and then a subset might actually go through with the fork. It's a fairly controlled validator set, so it's maybe not that complicated. And yeah,
what I would say is that generally speaking, and again we're seeing this with Paul and Semolina, the general feeling so far has been not to delay Sepolia. So I guess the real question is, can someone come up with a good reason as to why we should delay the Sepolia? Because obviously, if there's a good reason to delay it, that's fine. And we kind of want to think what that may be. So if anyone out there on this channel or listening elsewhere can think of, a good reason for us to delay, that would make sense. But I don't think we've really bumped into a good reason so far, given we understand what failed on Holesky, and we believe we've addressed that. And again, we'll do it tomorrow. There's more mitigations we can talk about, but that's probably the key question.
Yeah.
Is there a good reason? If anyone can come up with a good reason, then it would be really good to hear that sooner rather than later.
I haven't heard one either. And then the implication, if we don't delay Sepolia, is that Geth, Besu, and Nethermind users need to upgrade their software.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, so. Okay, I think we should make that final call tomorrow on the call, but it does seem to me like, there's not really a strong reason to delay it. I will update the blog post today with the releases for Nethermind, Geth, and Aragon. And then, if we choose to make some more drastic change tomorrow that affects every single client release, then we can make that decision then. There's a question, I guess, sorry, I'm lost in the chat, but saying we can't test consolidations on Sepolia. Is there a reason for that?
I think it's just back to being a permission validator set, right?
Yeah.
So in Sepolia, you can only become a validator if you've got a token. I don't know if there are lots and lots of tokens around or not. Again, that's back to Pandrops to what they've got there. But you can't. It's not a free for all like it is on Holesky. You can't spin up a validator without permission. Now we can obviously the existing validators can test consolidation or similar,
right.
but
yeah, okay, that's what I
expected.
expected.
Like 1,700 validators in total or something. So it's a very different beast to Holesky in terms of who can test and how big they can test.
It will still not be possible on Sepolia because you need a total active balance of 18 million ETH, which is not fulfilled on Sepolia.
Okay. Okay, so we have nowhere to test consolidations currently.
Not at scale and not general purpose.
Yeah, I think some was tried on Ephemery and seemed to be mostly okay, but the tooling was a little limited from what I hear, so I'm not sure how confident we should be if that's the only test before mainnet.
Unfortunately, the same story there. We have a too small validator set on Ephemery, so consolidations are not active there.
Should we be considering a DevNet 7 with 1.5 million validators on it so we can go back to Saulius's point of testing at scale and also being able to test large numbers of validated consolidations and similar?
We'd only need like 800,000 validators or something. We wouldn't need 1.5 million.
Is it practical to make a 800,000 validator DevNet? Like, is there a reason why we can't?
We've done such big test sets before, so if you decide to do so, I see no reason that we can't.
I think it would actually be quite valuable. Like, this seems to me easier than the whole like revive Holesky from some old snapshot and shadow fork and have like a bunch of the validators all async. So I don't see a reason why we would not move forward to do like, I don't know, say call it like 1 million validator, which is roughly the same as mainnet, right? And it's like 1.03 or something. So yeah, I think if PandaOps has some spare cycles, setting up DevNet 7 with 1 million validators to do like a replacement testing from Holesky would be good. And that seems like the minimum bar. I don't know if there's other aspects of Holesky that we'd want to test on a DevNet that we're not going to get from Sepolia. Obviously, the DevNet state will be kind of tiny compared to a testnet, but Sepolia has like a larger state. Is there anything else except from the number of validators that we've like quote lost?
I think the missing state could be a big problem because there are quite many staking pools and projects that would like to test on Pectra first, and we don't
And they're
have
not
them
on
on a
Sepolia?
DevNet. Well, on Sepolia, there's a closed validator set, so we can't have these staking pools there. But if you launch a separate DevNet, we won't have these projects there yet. So
can
But
we?
they could join, right? I mean, they can deploy the smart contracts, they can run stuff. I mean, the other trouble though, and this is one of those typical testing issues, we could reduce some of the parameters on DevNet 7. Obviously, you can't consolidate until after 27 hours or whatever it is, etc., etc. So there's a bunch of conditions around consolidations and exits and similar. We could tweak those figures, but then obviously we're not testing similar to mainnet. So if we're doing that, we would end up in a situation where DevNet 7 would have to be, relatively speaking, long-lived. We'd have to be looking at a month or so because people would want to deposit validators, create the validators, run them, consolidate them, everything else. But obviously that's not just one entity, that's a lot. And we're, again, limited on the entrance queue. So we probably need to recognize if we're spinning up a DevNet 7 and doing this in place of Holesky, then it's going to be running for a while before everyone's done the basic testing that they probably feel comfortable with doing.
Is there a way that we can have Genesis validators that are like quote transferable? Like, so I understand, like, yeah, I think this is a good point where we'd want to have like, say, staking pools or DVT operators or whatnot running, and we don't want to necessarily be bound by the entry queue. So is there a way that we can just like reserve a bunch of Genesis validators?
They're private keys, right? And we can
give
them to people. However, the issue is around things like DVT and similar, where they have processes through Lido potentially where they're feeding through smart contracts and similar. So we can absolutely short circuit giving people Genesis validators, but if they've got certain processes they want to be able to test, then like we said, if let's say a Lido equivalent or something where they have a smart contract, they want to feed this through and off they go, then we can't test that. But I mean, we're probably still going to be 80% of the way there if we just have a large DevNet 7. And then hopefully the entrance queue is much lower. So, the validators that need to activate through processes, smart contracts, whatever, will not necessarily get flooded by, some random guy wanting to run 10,000 validators to test.
Yeah. So I think, okay, what I would suggest then is we do DevNet 7 with, call it like 1 million validators, have DevOps set up a large set of those validators, say like, 1-200Ks that are somewhat easily transferable to like known entities. Also give a big chunk of ETH to a bunch of addresses and allow them to like seed their validators. And this won't be perfect, but it will allow us to test a large validator set from day one, to have a way to transfer already activated validators to like, infrastructure providers and staking pools and whatnot, and then have a bunch of ETH that we can send to people through like some faucet or just in larger chunks to actually do like more complicated setups. Does that seem reasonable? Okay. And yes, sorry for dumping.
Sounds like a plan, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Maris, you were saying something?
I said yes.
Okay. Okay, we only have 3 minutes left. Anything else people feel we should cover before we wrap up? Yeah, Terrence?
It would be not.
Yeah, sorry, I have a quick question. Are anyone aware of any relayer and builder that's currently working on Holesky right now? Meaning, are any of the blocks that's proposed today are going through an external relayer and builder?
So Sorry. I think Flashbots may be running a Holesky relay. And is someone from Kiln on the call? Sebastian. Anyway, I was talking to Sebastian. I think the bad block that had the deposit that started all of this came from the Flashbots Holesky relay.
Okay,
But
no worries. Yeah.
yeah,
yeah.
I don't know. Are you looking to test it or something?
No. Local block is fine. I mean, we just need blocks, so local block is fine. But then again, I'm thinking about like if the node is optimistic, I don't need to wait for the EL to sync to the head. I could just use the builder block, and that's even faster. But then again, there's definitely some complexity here. It's not worth getting into it right now. But yeah, we can talk about this offline.
Yeah. Do others propose when they're optimistic?
I mean, we're not supposed to, but we can hack it to propose faster. But then again,
Oh,
there's
I
definitely
see.
a lot of debate here. Yeah.
Yeah, I would
We can cover this
Strictly
offline.
analyze how
no.
many of these types of things we do.
Strictly no, Terrence.
Okay. And yeah, last Maris had a comment saying, you know, teams should write up their learnings and postmortems and all of that. I agree, that's all very important, but I think we should keep, like, it's fine to wait a week to do this properly. Let's get Holesky back on track. Ideally fork Sepolia, and then we can, we can reflect. And yeah, Paul, to your question, I think, yeah, we should ask this question tomorrow. I'm not sure we'll have an answer tomorrow. Yeah, we should at least open the conversation, and if we can have a clear plan to move forward with Sepolia and a new DevNet, then that's already a good start. Anything else before we wrap up? Okay, well, yeah, thanks again, everyone, for the hard work getting us to the space. Yeah, I think we have a chance to save Holesky, so let's try and do that and keep the chain alive.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.